Good evening and welcome to the March 6th, 2023 Policy Committee meeting of the School District of Haverford Township. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Rishi, I'll turn it over to you for the first agenda item.
So for our first agenda item this evening, we're going to hear from Dr. George Ramoundos, who will provide us with an update on the human goals that relate to the Human Resources Department. Within each of the committee meetings, we receive goal updates periodically, and this will be George's home for, providing updates for those goals that relate to HR. So Dr. Ramoundos, we're excited to hear from you this evening.
Thank you, Dr. Good evening, everyone. I wanted to start off and say thank you for allowing me the opportunity to provide a goal update for the HR department. I am happy to highlight the exciting things happening in HR. The HR department is focusing on 3 goals. During this presentation, I will share what action steps the HR department has taken to implement these goals. Goal number 1, incorporate best practices in human resource management. Goal number 2, meet the recommendations of the Chester County Intermediate Unit HR audit in the areas of screening, interviewing, and reference checking. And goal number 3, examine the functions of the HR department to increase efficiency and build in redundancies. Goal number 1 is to incorporate best practices of human resource management and oversight coordinate staffing, recruitment, and other human resource functions within our school district. The school district has a strategic goal of recruiting, hiring, and retaining a more diverse workforce. The HR department wants to enhance diversity in our school district. We want our school district to be a great place to work where all our employees feel supported and valued. One way to achieve this goal is through the support of your Grow Your Own teaching program. The HR department, Mrs. Christina Carter, and Mr. Leon Smith are excited to work in partnership with the DCIU's Future Educators Academy to enlighten our students about the field of education. The DCIU has changed the name of the Grow Your Own program to the Future Educators Academy. During the Future Educators Academy, students will gain leadership skills, learn strategies for college and career readiness, connect with professionals in the areas of education, and prepare for a teaching career. We are only in the beginning phases of this process, but it's exciting to see our students are welcoming the idea of a career in education. Myself and Haverford High School students attended the first session of the Future Educators Academy at the DCIU. The future educators in this picture are Chloe Speech, Marcus Idley Tucker, Frank Singleton, and Raven Campbell. The other students in the pictures are members of the Student Forum, which also happens at the DCIU at the same time. We have Oluwami Day, Aiden Hunter, and Kennedy Outland. The first meeting focused on team building with future educators from other Delaware County school districts. They talked about the purpose of the academy, and students shared their stories. During the meeting, potential future educators shared things that their teachers have done to inspire them. All students at the first meeting said they would come back when they were getting on the bus, and we were like, yes. So that was a win. The second Future Educators Academy meeting was held on Wednesday, February 24th. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend the academy on the 24th as I attended an HR conference hosted by the Pennsylvania Association of School Personnel Administrators. We were fortunate to have Mr. Smith and Mrs. Carter attend the event. Prior to the meeting on the 24th, Mr. Smith met with our future educators. At their meeting, he debriefed them on the first meeting at the DCIU held in December, prepared the students for the 24th meeting, and shared some of the benefits of being an educator despite the students' concern of low pay. At the February 24th meeting, future educators interviewed educators in a variety of positions and gained insights into the field of possibilities within the educational career pathways. Students shared out what they learned to other student groups and compiled an educator career portfolio that students will be able to refer to. The DCIU will have 2 more meetings, one more in March, and then another one in April, and then they'll have a summer institute, a 4-day summer institute the week of August 7th. Another way to enhance our diversity is through career fairs. HR directors in Delaware and Montgomery counties have been collaborating with the University of Penn to hold an Educator of Color career open house. The DVCEE has held multiple meetings to put together the open house with HR directors. The open house will take place at University of Penn this Thursday from 4 to 6 p.m. Attendees at this event will have an opportunity to connect with the staff from DVCEE member districts in the greater Philadelphia region and to learn more about the districts and potential job openings. I also have some exciting news to share this evening. HR and Mrs. Carter are developing a Forging Outstanding Relationship with Diverse Staff career networking event, the first annual. The date for this event is May 24th at Haverford Middle School from 6 to 8 p.m. What's nice is I'll be able to share a flyer for that event at the DVCE Open House this week and also at the Great Philadelphia Teacher Job Fair in April. More information will be coming out about this exciting event. Goal number 2 is to align the processes and meet the recommendations from the CCIU HR audit. The action step for this goal was to form an HR committee. In the 1920 school year, the district received the CCIU HR audit. This year, John Nolan, who's the interim HR director, and myself formed an HR committee to look at those recommendations in the audit and see if we were able to implement the recommendations, specifically areas of screening, interviewing, and reference checking. The HR committee consisted of building principals, assistant principals, director of learning and assessment, transportation, and pupil services. And Mr. Nolan and I just want to take the time right now to say thank you to those committee members for their time and dedication to this work, their countless hours. Their feedback, we know from the committee members with this work will make the HR department stronger and more effective in the years to come. So what did we talk about? Here are the discussion points during the committee meetings. We discussed the utilization of current resources to develop best qualified and diverse candidate pool. We used Talent Ed Recruit and Hire as our software system. We were able to update the filter system in the Talent Ed Recruit and Hire to make it more user-friendly for our administrators and supervisors to scan our candidate pools. Interviews best practices discussed and developed with the HR committee. We talked about best practices during the interview process. We discussed questions that are allowed to be asked during interviews and should not be asked during the interview process. We formalized expectations for reference checking. We've always conducted a reference checking, but now we can store all of our information in Talent Ed Recruit and Hire, so all of the supervisors and principals and administrators can go in there and put all the reference checking information in there for all of us in HR to be able to take a look at. Review teacher questions at the elementary level. We need to update the elementary questions. We wanted to get the feedback from the elementary principals. We have a couple different versions, so we're gonna go ahead and update those questions. And implement a confidentiality agreement for interview teams. Confidentiality agreements will be signed by the interview team, and then that information will be housed in the HR department. We're going to provide additional training to Talent Ed Recruit and Hire, the software that administrators use. Some administrators are more familiar than others, but we want to make sure, since we updated the filters in the system, that all administrators are aware of the technology that's in there. So we'll update the training on that and provide professional development. And also develop protocols to streamline screening of the candidate pool. We now have also a color code system in Talent Ed. So when we're screening our candidates, we can use a color code system to look at those candidates and see if they meet the needs that our principals and supervisors are looking for. And in the next steps, we're going to share the information and findings with all the administrators and supervisors as well. And then goal number 3 is to examine the functions and protocols of the Human Resource Department to increase efficiency and to build in redundancies where necessary. And the action step was to get the input from the HR staff. So I am excited to report this evening that we have started to onboard all of our new employees with a new online system. New employees are able to put their majority of their information online and work with our team to get all the proper paperwork. if anyone has any questions while they're filling out the paperwork, they can call our office, and our team can go right into the system and see where they're having trouble and support them right there. And at any time, somebody can also come into office and we can assist them as well. With the new system, our team is able to get notified through email and update and approve any staff information for all staff members in the district, not just those who fall under their responsibility. So if we get an alert that someone needs updating in the system from transportation or from our teachers, it doesn't matter. Any of our confidential secretaries can help them immediately, and that just has to sped up our process. And the last one, HR, the business office, and the technology department have been working with the new software system, so all leave plans are current and accurate in the system. And that concludes my goal update. Again, thank you for this opportunity, and I'll see if anyone has any questions. Thank you.
I had one question about the future educators. And we also had heard from the DCIU about their career and technical training program that's more like an enrollment-based thing. Can you just talk about what the difference is? It sounds like a couple good
Yeah, this isn't enrollment-based. This is just like, hey, let's learn about the field of education. There's so much to offer here. We need teachers. And we want you to know that it's not just, you could be a business manager if you want to. You can lead transportation. You can work in maintenance. There's all these different things. And it's really important because we really need, bless you, we really need teachers right now. So this is just, hey, let's get involved with the field of education. The DCIU in the future meetings, they have other universities that are going to come out and talk to the students about what it is for the enrollment. And then they're going to have also other people from the HR departments, the business office, transportation, come and talk to the kids as well too. So this is just like getting to know the field of education, and hopefully they want to do it. So that's the difference. The other one's an enrollment that you would take classes and
Right.
yeah.
I just wanted to have a chance to highlight that. It sounds
Yeah,
like
and our group are freshmen and sophomores, so the hope is that they'll continue the interest in the field of education.
I just want to say thank you. A couple of things on this presentation were really helpful. I think first, it's great to see the interactions that we have with the DCIU, the CCIU. We get, proposals and budgets for those all the time. And so it's good to always see like how we're interacting with them and how they're assisting us with different processes. But it really is also helpful to see the process for working with our current educators, our current staff on hiring new staff, because we do obviously have a couple open positions, important positions coming up, and it's good for us, the board, and good for the public to see what goes into this hiring. It's not just there's an open position, we're gonna think about it right now. It's good to see the process of how are we going to do this? How are we going to have this go toward our district goals, including diversity and inclusion of our staff. So I just want to thank you for this really great presentation.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you to our team as well, too. We put a lot of hard work into it.
I'm excited about you said the Future Educators Academy, this was the first year for it?
The Future Educators, well, they had a Grow Your Own program at the DCIU, but this is the Future Educators Academy. And what we learned is we want to continue this, and we need a lot of buy-in from all the HR directors from the school district to support that as well, too. So the hope is we continue this and it just becomes a bigger program. We get more kids involved.
That's great. Yeah, no, I think like every day in the news, you hear about all the teacher shortages.
Yeah.
I'm really glad that we as a district are kind of doing our part to help come to a solution of that problem, with also an idea of diversifying our staff.
Our workforce.
And I love the idea of Grow Your Own, where like our students are going out and then they're coming back, and like I think that speaks to the sense of community of Haverford.
And it's really nice to have Mr. Smith up at the high school to be able to talk to the kids at any time if they have any questions, and to get that feedback and build that connection and build that relationship. It's really nice.
I think to continue the praise for the Future Educators program, I like the idea that it is providing an overview of all that the education system can offer. I often think that, when students are coming through school, they are a picture of education working in the field as a teacher. And so letting them see all the moving parts that goes into them being educated, I think it's helpful for them to see that other aspect, and then being introduced to those areas as well could certainly continue to grow the field of education. So I'm happy to see that.
Yeah.
Okay, like all the questions. Thank thank you so much. For the
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Ramoundos. The next section of our agenda are just some policy updates of things that we had spoken about before. We're not bringing forward for review and work this evening, but just to sort of let you know where we are in the process. And one of those was policy number 627, district-initiated real estate tax assessment appeals. We put that on hold because we were waiting to hear a court decision, and Justin will give us that update.
Yes, so we discussed this back in the fall, and we decided to wait until the Supreme Court issued an opinion in the GM Berkshire case. That opinion was actually issued approximately a week ago. And in a nutshell, the Supreme Court upheld a political subdivision's ability to initiate a tax assessment appeal. It's interesting, though, because the court at the time the decision was issued was down to 6 justices with the passing of Justice Baer. And there actually ended up being a split amongst the remaining 6, 3 and 3, as to what is the appropriate methodology for taking an assessment appeal. So the ability to overall to take the appeal is still upheld, but the methodology by which a political subdivision or municipality takes the appeal remains to be determined. I mean, at this point, because there was a discrepancy amongst the remaining 6, the default position is that the underlying Commonwealth Court's opinion is upheld. And in this particular case, the methodology at issue was appealing recently sold properties that there was a delta or I'll call it a gap between the assessment value on the county property records and then what the recent sale price was for. So if it sold for much more than was reflected in the county property records, and that amount would generate approximately, I believe it was $150,000 of a difference, that was what was getting appealed in that particular school district case. So again, there was a dispute amongst the justices, but overall the ability to do so is upheld. And so the reason that's important for our purposes is we discussed this back in the fall about potentially moving forward with the review of a prospective tax assessment appeals policy. And so if that's something that the committee is still interested in reviewing, then our recommendation would be to put it on for the next meeting.
The next policy committee.
I apologize, the next policy
Yes.
committee meeting.
I'm still interested in such a policy, and I already marked this one out. But I'm happy to look at some different proposals. I don't know if there are, the current one, this came from PSBA, or?
No, I think the prior version or draft that we shared with you is one that we have utilized in other school districts.
Okay, and that was gonna be my question, sort of what our neighboring districts we compare ourselves with, what do their policies look like? And I think it makes sense to have this on our next meeting, but I'm happy to hear from other members of the board.
My only question would be, and I can't think of when the next policy meeting is right now.
I think it'll actually be next month, because this was.
It'll be April.
Yeah, because this was the February
Or
meeting.
rescheduled. Okay.
Yeah.
So my question would be, and it sounds like it would be, would there be enough time between this meeting and the next meeting to gather all the additional information that could be needed to draft proposals for a new policy that would include the recent ruling?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so we'll plan for that for the April meeting. Okay. The second policy update is policy 912, research involving district students and staff. We have discussed that a couple of times, and there was a question that we considered, do we even need this policy? That came up as a question for the group to consider. And I had been saying, because when asked, I had been saying, you know, we've not had a policy, but I typically have not allowed outside groups in for studies. So I don't see myself making a change to that, but I am very cognizant that some of these policies go into place, and it might be years and years before they are reviewed, and I'm sure Antoinette won't let it be another 20 years before some of these are reviewed. But seriously, we can put a policy like this in. One of the revisions that we made at the last meeting was to look at providing parents with the opportunity to opt into the study, which was a little bit different, where we will make that change to the language in the policy, so parents would have to opt into it. There's also a question of would we require a board vote before participation in such a policy, and that's a fine practice to institute there as well. I just want to look at the timeline. I mean, that could rule out some you would not want to call a special meeting to do something like this, but we can look at that language, and then we will make sure that the language in the AR is in concert with the language in the policy, specifically as it relates to parents opting in and bringing this forward to the board for a vote. So we will bring this back with that in mind at the April meeting, if that's okay.
And so that's going to be beyond the changes. I'm sorry, go ahead, Anne, first.
I was just saying that makes good sense to me. Go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say, so the language that's in there currently, it's still being modified, and it'll come back at the April meeting. And I mean, I'm curious, also you mentioned that the board vote may be an issue with like a time constraint. I'm just wondering are there any, do you foresee, I guess, any studies where time constraints may be an issue or not? I mean, a lot of these studies are planned ahead.
A lot of the studies are planned ahead. People would need to be cognizant of the fact that they can't arrive here on a Monday and say, can we do this next week?
Oh, no, sure, no, I get that,
They
okay.
have to be good planners.
Okay, that's good, thank you. Yeah, I think I think that would be I think that kind of language might make a lot of people a bit more comfortable. Just, on the off chance that, you leave someday, we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, it gives the option if the board, wishes to do that, or if for some reason, an opportunity were to come before us.
Right.
Then we can look at doing it within the parameters of the policy.
Okay.
The next section of our agenda is actually the work on policies that we'll undertake tonight. And we've got seven or eight policies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 policies there on the list. So between Antoinette and Justin, too many J's.
Ms. Nadarest, do you want me to start with 203?
Sure, yeah, let's start with 203. I think did we discuss this one before, or maybe I just looked at it before?
203 is communicable diseases and immunization. We did discuss it in December. It was adopted in 2010, and I think last reviewed in 2015. The only updates since December are just some minor revisions with regard to highlighting the definitions throughout for consistency. There was a directive from the committee to utilize a lowercase version of student rather than the uppercase version. So as far as the policy itself is concerned, those are really the only revisions that were made to the policy.
Should we talk about the policy first before moving on to the AR?
Whatever the committee wishes, that's fine.
Does anyone have any discussion points for the purpose section of this policy? Moving on to the definitions. I appreciate these definitions that we have. Another term that we use, and I'm not sure if there's a statutory definition, is religious grounds. So we talk about that is an exemption for religious grounds. And I was just curious if that's defined in statute. I think it is defined in case law. And I wanted to know if we wanted to put something like that in here, just so that people understood what that meant.
Within the code, it's referenced, but not specifically defined within the school code or regulations, state regulations.
Okay, I know, I think well, I guess I don't know if it's in this context or not. I know it's defined in other
It-
case law
it is.
contexts for, some sort of genuinely held or something.
We were talking
You're
about bona
testing me, I think.
bona fide, yeah, the bona
yeah.
fide religious
There you go.
belief, yeah.
So I don't know if we wanted to do that. It's a, just a little bit ambiguous. But that was my only comment on the definitions. Any other comments?
I just had a question. Throughout, there are words in bold, and it seems like those are all in the definitions, but then later, certificate of immunization is bolded, but it's not in the definitions. Should that be?
You must be looking at a different version.
Okay.
Yeah, the two definitions in this drafted policy are certificate of immunization and
Looking at the
medical
one on
Did you look
certificate.
on the ARs? Are you on the ARs?
I'm on the policy.
That's the AR.
Oh, okay, nope, yep, there it is, there it is, thanks, sorry.
You're welcome.
Not my best day.
Okay, anything else on authority?
I had a question here. The authority is enumerated by the Health Advisory Board and in the manner directed by the Secretary of Health. And I wondered if there's, like, Health Advisory Board is a defined term here, but it's not one that I'm necessarily familiar with, like, who is that? And then the Secretary of Health, I wasn't sure if that was reference to Pennsylvania or if that is a county position, just maybe a little clarity on where this authority and what other governmental entity we are looking at.
We can certainly add that.
Just for clarification.
Going back to the definitions for a second, should there be some consistency between the definitions laid out in the beginning of the AR and the beginning of the policy? Since the same terms are being used, we have 4 definitions in the AR, but only 2 in the policy, at the beginning of the
We
policy.
just want all 6 in both.
I mean, that would be my preference.
Maybe, I guess, are the 4 that are in the ARs, they're not used in the policy, which is why they appear first in the AR?
No, communicable disease is used in the policy. Statement of exemption is used in the policy. And sorry, I just saw immunization, there's a few spaces there.
Yes, and then I think it does make sense to just have all of those in the policy, and then we can just have the AR incorporate them, right? We don't need to have them twice, just say incorporated from the policy.
And I think this is one that, I don't know if it fits into the purpose or authority, but this is another of the policies that relies extensively on Pennsylvania law. We are not suggesting our own kind of tweaks or pivots to what is laid out by the health department and the requirements for public schools in Pennsylvania. So I don't know if there's a way to kind of pick that up in either the purpose or authority that we are aligned with those requirements.
So what I'm sorry, what we did do is, we did add a general citation to like the required immunization chart.
I thought those were helpful, the websites and things.
Do you want to add them to we could add like, numbered links to the authority section? If it's a little bit cleaner.
Oh,
Because it's just a general citation at the bottom at this point with the link, but
Oh, I see.
we could,
A link to the health.pa.gov site.
yeah.
okay.
That might pick it up then, as an easier reference for people to make.
Yep.
Sorry, Bridget, are you still up in the purpose, or is there another place?
That was in the authority.
I was either in the purpose or the authority, just to have that, link back to what's mandated by Pennsylvania law be clearly centered in this policy.
Sorry, I just have like a procedural suggestion going forward. I don't know if it'd be worthwhile to, in the future, maybe have these policies projected in some way so we could follow along. Because I feel like sometimes we're like, where are you, which document, where are you, where are we looking? I mean, we could still reference our own, but I think when we're actually discussing individual points, it might be nice to have a common reference we could look at.
You can consider that, yeah.
Going back to Bridget's point, under authority, the second paragraph, a student shall be exempt from the requirements. I'm assuming that that comes from some statute or something like that.
Yes.
Is there, but there's not like a specific reference there. Should there be? Is there one? I mean, we're not, that's like,
That's from the code.
that is our obligation by law, right? So.
It is, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we can
Okay.
add, and I think the relevant
That's
section
number
is already cited. It would
2.
just be,
Okay.
it would just be adding.
Okay,
It would just
I
be
didn't know if
adding.
that was worthwhile to do.
Like have a citation right after that
Just
one.
right, yeah, because it was before the first one, so that's why I wasn't sure. I assumed that it was, but just to be super clear. And then the one that was added, point 4, annually report required immunization data, has footnote 5 with it. But I didn't see one labeled as footnote 5.
When's it for?
That is correct. That is correct. We will fix that. Is that, Dr. Crispin, just like the last point you made, that's directly out of, school code?
Yeah, I assumed that it probably was.
Is .5 on here and just not labeled?
No, I think it was not added.
Okay.
Because that's actually, that is a more recent update. So that's my mistake, I apologize.
Anything else on the policy itself? All right, let's move to the ARs. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna move all those definitions to the policy. And then it starts off with immunization. Does anyone have any comments on this section?
I had one at the end, so this immunization section lays out the requirements and the documentation for immunization reporting. The next to last paragraph says waivers are applicable to the immunization requirements may be available to students who are experiencing homelessness or in foster care in incidents where students are unable to locate immunization records due to a disaster, if there's a vaccine shortage, and the last one says, or for students who transfer into the district. And that provision didn't strike me by my quick glance of Pennsylvania law, that why would students who transfer into the district be exempt from supplying immunization records? Don't they have the requirement to transfer them from previous districts, or?
Sometimes the school code does provide for there being like a delay.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess this whole paragraph is interesting. Is this really about, a permanent waiver or more of a temporary waiver, right? And I'm just wondering if maybe we put that in there, temporary waivers, to applicable immunization requirements, because it's really, for someone experiencing homelessness or foster care, those types of things where it would be more difficult for them to get them, but that doesn't mean that it's not expected. And I think I also had a comment on this one. I'd like to add, and, I would like to hear from the district on this, Dr. Rushi, but I'd like to add something to the effect of, when practicable, district personnel will endeavor to work with the student to connect the student with resources to obtain such immunizations. And I am thinking about, those students who are experiencing homelessness or something like that, where they just really don't know what the resources are available to them. And I would, with the proper qualifying language, wouldn't want to, force the district to do anything, but just sort of have that encouragement there for the district to help connect them with resources.
Yeah, and usually they're now referred, I believe, to the county health department.
Okay. That's fine too.
What is the language that the state uses around transfers? Because I want us to be sure we're consistent with the code.
Yeah, I looked at the, I think it was one of the references in the policy, and it it didn't seem to me to give much of an exception. I mean, it might have been like a 5 days or something like that to produce the reports, but, I didn't read it as transfer students had a waiver to immunization. So that's how I read it here now, and I think it could be clarified to either temporary, like,
Yeah, and it's really not a waiver. So that's, I mean, I think in the traditional sense of what a waiver constitutes.
mhm.
Like a grace
Um,
period then.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
right.
maybe
Yeah.
extract that
That
specific
word.
point and make it its own sentence. Would you still like it under the temporary waivers? I mean, because it probably still is best left a part of that heading if we're gonna create the new heading, but just to make it its own sentence as a standalone.
Yes, I think make it its own sentence, but I do think still having the whole paragraph be about temporary. I don't know if we wanna call it a waiver or, extension, maybe, extension of the requirement timeline or something like that.
Where did this drafted language come from? Like, is this something that,
This is, this particular section is language that we have, utilized in other districts.
How much of what we're listing here in this AR as to these different procedures and rules, how much of this is dictated by school code?
all of it?
All of
Pretty
it,
much all of
okay.
it.
All of it except the exclusion procedure that was carried over from 2010.
Okay, and, I mean, I was looking at some other ARs, and it looks like we're not citing any relevant footnotes or school code or anything like that, but should we be? Particularly in this case, when this isn't, like, this is, like, we don't have leeway here, this is just how it is.
We can. What we have typically been doing is, unless it's like requested that there's a specific citation that goes along with a rule, we haven't necessarily been doing that.
Okay.
But we can do whatever the committee wishes.
One suggestion I had, since these are the administrative regulations, there's a couple of forms that are referenced here, so if those could be linked so that people, like, there's the one that says, like, a guardian shall complete a medical history report. Like, is that a form that's available online that
Okay.
gives the information to be completed? Like, that could be a useful link to attach to this, or other ones that just, bring all of those kind of to one heading, or even if it's a link to the portion of our website or whatever, but that might be a way, like we've done that in some of the other policies, to have those forms attached.
I have a question about the exclusion procedure section. Specifically the mention of the panel that would be convened.
Exclusion.
Starts on the second paragraph.
Dr. King, could you speak up a little more? into
Yeah,
the
so the
microphone?
exclusion procedure section,
Yep.
the second paragraph, that
Mhm.
makes reference to a panel that shall be convened to review the medical history. Who would consist of that panel?
I had that question too, and I see that the panel is further described below, and wondered if we could put that in,
that up.
because it's like a couple paragraphs down that it says, I think that's 2 paragraphs down, that the panel shall include, and it has the coordinating administrator, school physician, school nurse, family physician, parent, and appropriate local health official. But yeah, since panel is included earlier without that explanation, maybe to say as defined below, or comprised as described below, or something like that.
Well, I think, so just sort of backing up about what this exclusion procedure is, and if it's something that the district has used or would want to use. I understand this is the only part that is not coming from a statute, and so we have a lot more leeway here. This was coming from, the last time that the policy had been reviewed, which was 13 years ago. So, interested to hear the board's thoughts, and also Dr. Rucci, yours on this exclusion procedure, and if this is something that the district has used before or would want to be able to use.
We have not, had to use this policy in the time that I've been here, so I can't speak to, prior to that, but, typically, and certainly prior to COVID, if a student would have even something like whooping cough, that
Right.
like parents would almost automatically, or guardians, say that the child is going to stay home.
Right. I guess we need something
We
to
need
say
yeah.
that you can't just continue to be in school, right? If you have,
A
whooping
communicable.
cough or measles or something.
Ms. Snodgrass, just as a point for consideration, the health and safety code also does have presumptive exclusionary timelines as
Okay.
well for many of these.
Maybe
community-
that's what we want then.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually looking, sorry, I was gonna mention that. So if you look in the PA code, there's actually a section on responsibilities of schools and school administrators. The AR is basically written for us here, so I would encourage us to definitely take a look at that. Looks like it answers a lot of the questions about transfers, having that 30 days to provide the records, discusses students who might be experiencing homelessness. I mean, it lays out everything. I don't think we need to sit here and try to make up our own language.
I think that makes a lot of sense then, to pull from there and put that into our administrative regulation, just to really align ourselves more with what the, state health authority is expecting us to do, or guiding us to do.
With regard to the exclusion
The
procedure,
exclusion procedure, and also, like Dr. Larson said, the timeline for those temporary, exemptions.
It's 2385, responsibilities of schools and school administrators within health and safety, Title 28 of the PA code.
Yeah, I will say for the exclusion procedure, the first paragraph just kind of confused me. Students who have been diagnosed by a physician as being absent due to a communicable disease not specifically listed by the Department of Health, which I didn't understand that, or who have been diagnosed as a carrier of such disease may be excluded for the protection of the school community under the following procedures. So I'm like, if a student is absent, why then they must also be excluded? Like, I think the language is confusing, and I'm not quite sure what that means, a communicable disease not listed by the Department of Health. So, yeah, I think if we could pull some language closer to statute, I think that would clarify it.
so I actually think that did come from some of the archaic school code.
Okay.
But I
Only the
understand the
confusing
point.
parts.
The
I understand
confusing
the
part is
point.
great.
So you just want a more kind of reasonable introductory paragraph, and then kind of keep it aligned with code for the,
For the
Yeah.
exclusion procedure, yes. And if, Dr. Larson, you say there's a chart?
It's not a chart, I mean, it just lays out, it's a multi-point, section. I mean, it like sets the timelines for certain things. It hits some of what's already in the AR, but I think it's more comprehensive. And it, like I said, it's already there and it's meant for schools and school administrators.
And what we could do is just reference it, and we could say something, referencing the statute, the timelines, as put forth in XYZ statute, so that if the statute changes, we don't have to change our policy.
that was gonna be my question to Dr. Christman's point, is how far would you like us to go with legal citations within the AR itself?
I don't think it needs to be, to the last Romanette, right? I think it can just be general from the section. But I do think we should have something in the ARs, just to show that it's not something that we as Haverford made up.
Sure.
Especially when
That makes
something already
sense to you,
exists.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I mean, it could, like, even just in the purpose, it could say something in the purpose, that compliant with school code and, health department regulations and mandates or something like that. I don't know exactly what the language would be, but, something more general, just saying pretty much everything that follows is directly from what we are required to do and, the procedure set forth by the law.
Okay.
So however we say that in a sort of concise way, I guess, would be
Okay.
good.
So I think this one has some work. We'll bring it back to the policy committee next time. That way everyone can see the different changes.
One other thing that I noted here as I went through some of the other upcoming policies that we talk about is some of the consistency in phrasing, that here it references a school physician, somewhere else it's a district physician. So just to clarify those titles.
Okay. Next up is the policy 209, health services. And this one was last reviewed in August 2010. And I believe it's going to be, the suggestion looks like it is to be significantly shortened as the policy, and then the majority then put into the administrative regulation.
That is correct. So there was some regulatory language within the existing version of the policy. So we did, we made a couple recommendations. One, to create a purpose section, and an authority section. Or actually, I'm sorry, to revise the authority section and then create a delegation of responsibility section, and then create a separate AR. There have been some significant updates over the course of time.
I like a short and sweet policy, so I'm a big fan of these changes here, which are very straightforward and basically just instructing the district to comply with the law and then create administrative regulations. Does anyone have any comments on the policy itself?
One, I will just note that we've helpfully had the current policy shown on the board. What the board is reviewing are revisions and markups of that. So what you see here is the current policy, not the changes that we are contemplating or discussing. I think the only comment I had on this one was the authority section includes 7 citations, but the list in the at the end of the legal citations only includes 6. Yep.
See that? And so, President Wiedemann, that 7th citation should have been the first general citation that's not numbered underneath number 6, but I will make that correction.
Okay.
All right, so then going to the AR, which is 5 pages now, somewhat lengthy, taken most of the policy and put it into administrative regulations. Does anyone have comments on the purpose or the general requirements? Okay, I do. So it says in the second paragraph, the individual records of the health and dental examinations shall be maintained as confidential. Their contents shall be divulged only when necessary for the health of the student or at the request of the parent/guardian to a physician, subject to statute and board policy 216. I think actually 203 said that we also have to give the records to a new school district when the student moves. So I wasn't sure if we wanted to put that in here too.
We can certainly add that. Although, subject to statute would probably have you covered on that. We can delineate it though, if that's a desire of the committee.
Or we could just refer to 203 since we're already referring to 216.
216 and 203.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And then examinations. Is there any comments on this one?
I think this maybe goes back to Bridget's point about school physician. Who is the school physician? Do we have like a school physician? We do.
Yes, we appoint a school physician. We do have one appointed for
Okay.
this year. We also have appointed a district, there's that terminology again, district dentist. We're still in the process of locating. That's currently vacant for us right now.
Okay.
Okay.
But we normally, yep,
Okay.
and you approve those on a yearly basis.
Okay. So then should that, I don't know, like sometimes we put things in like capitalize the first thing so that this is like a specific title, right? Like this isn't just like,
We
do
can
you know
just,
what I'm saying? I
we
don't
could
know.
have school physician as appointed by the board, something
yeah.
like that, just to show that it is a position, a specific
Okay.
person.
Mhm.
Does that make
So
sense?
school physician and school, like,
Capital.
and school or district.
District dentist.
District
District
appointed
physician.
dentist,
District- yeah.
appointed
District
physician.
physician. and district
Yes, you could
dentist.
put district appointed school physician, I guess that's the official title, and then district appointed district dentist.
And just add a definitions
Yeah, I
section
think
at the
so,
top.
just to be, cause I think folks will be confused, and they'll think, is that my school nurse?
Yeah,
That's
cause
what I was thinking.
that's what I was thinking originally. I was like, so just the school nurse then, or, okay.
Yeah.
So that's like a very specific thing, okay. And then I guess just more of a question of practice. So I'm thinking about, you know, parents that are, you know, kind of now going through the enrollment process for incoming kindergartners, right? I remember a few years ago when I went through that process, you know, a bunch of paperwork or something was emailed to me and it was like, have this paperwork filled out. I don't remember, and it's been a while, so, I don't remember that I received anything about, do you want this done by a school physician? I just remember getting paperwork and saying, have this filled out by the physician and submit it to the school nurse.
I think there is an option, I know there is
Okay.
for dentists.
Okay.
And I, you know, Dr. Rishi can correct me if I'm wrong about the physician, but I have done it
Mhm.
recently as well. And, I
Okay.
do think that there was
You
that
want to
option.
have it completed by
to have
the
it- yes.
district.
Mhm.
Okay.
So I think it's just part of like the 100 papers that you get.
Okay, yeah, and I mean, that was like maybe in 2020, so I may have missed it. Okay, yeah, and that makes sense. Okay, yeah, I just wanted to be clear about how that information was sort of given out to parents and guardians so that they were clear that they can do it through the school or they can do it, you know, with their own pediatrician or whomever.
I think it's right. You sign up online and then you get an email
Mhm.
from someone in the district with a lot of attachments. I think that it's in there.
Okay.
I remember the dentist one because we were just switched, so.
I had a question quickly, is there any, the ages at which examinations are given, are those governed by?
School code.
They are governed by school code, okay.
I have a question under the health services section. I'm slightly skipping ahead a bit. So number 1 says, it talks about a vision test can be given by a school nurse, medical technician, or teacher. Are teachers giving vision tests?
No.
Is that something that we can,
Was that something that would be like a last resort if they had to or something, or would that never happen?
In all the years that I've been in education, I've never seen a teacher requested to do something like that. I think they would question it.
Yeah.
yeah.
They would have concerns probably for that.
It's probably not in their contract.
That's a good
Yeah.
point, Dr. King. We can probably remove that one.
Yeah.
I was like, man, has school changed? And I
Jack of all trades we are in Haverford Township.
I guess that's similar for number 3 as well, it says school nurse or teacher, so I mean,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, we can strike that teacher
Yeah,
piece
it's
out
like,
there.
but still.
Okay.
Can I just ask for some clarification on language under private examinations? It's the last sentence in that paragraph. Just trying to convert things to more understandable language. That's just a really complicated sentence, and I'm not sure that everybody would necessarily be able to read that and understand exactly what they were supposed to do and when. So if there's just a way that we could reword that to be maybe a little more plain English, a little clearer,
Sure.
that would be helpful. There's a lot going on in that sentence, right?
It needs a flow chart,
Yeah,
doesn't
it does, yeah. I read it a
I
couple
agree on
times
that,
and
yeah.
I still wasn't 100% sure.
The first four words alone are like, what's
Yeah,
happening?
If thens, but fors, right?
I think if we put in lieu examinations in quotes or something, that might help. If that's such an awkward term, you can put in lieu and quote or something.
It's actually what I wrote down.
Oh, great. We're on the same page.
Yes.
And then, sorry, I'm jumping around here. Under health services, we just talked about the other ones that were done by a school nurse or a medical technician. For number 4 and 5, and I guess 6 too, do we want to specify who would be giving those tests since we did it in the other ones? I'm assuming that's not just like a teacher doing this. I'm assuming those would all be done by nurses or other medical professionals within the school. So do we want to just specify that for consistency?
Yeah, 5 is
So,
the.
I'm gonna push back on the whole teachers thing for a second.
Mhm.
Do PE teachers ever do this? I'm just thinking back to like the Hinter times when I was in high school. Like, I feel like they were sometimes tasked with that.
Maybe
Not in Haverford? Okay.
Not in, I've never seen.
Okay.
Or I've required a phys ed teacher to do something like that.
So maybe then, like you said, Dr. Crispin, for consistency, if it's the school nurse or some other staff member, we say
I think
who's doing it.
having school nurse or medical technician in all of them, or we could have it up front.
that's what I was gonna suggest,
Right?
if it's
Each
consistent
student being
across,
given the
yeah.
following by a school nurse or medical technician,
Mhm.
and then we can make it each one shorter.
Yeah, I think that's better.
I wondered if in the reading, so health services starts the vision test, the hearing test, the height and weight, and then it says test for tuberculosis, which I was like, whoa, right, like that just, but then, right, so, but then the phrasing here, kind of has in grade 9, if required by law. So I wondered if the if required by law should start that one, just because that is not the same of a routine test, right, in the ways that the vision test and hearing test are.
Not anymore.
Isn't it required by law? What's the if?
The tuberculosis?
Yeah, I thought it was required by law. I'm wondering why
heard
it says
it.
if in
TB
here.
Yeah, I believe it is.
All students are
Maybe
administered
ads
a TB
required
test?
by law.
Because teachers need TB tests, right? Like, everyone needs a
Teachers
TB test.
So that is a routine one that the school nurses are doing?
I think you do have to. You
I
know what?
don't know,
I'm gonna
maybe
have to say- I'm gonna-
I had
I'm
2 kids go through 9th grade
gonna
and I
take-
must have
I'm
missed
gonna
that
take-
one.
I'm gonna just go back on that and I'm gonna make a note to revisit that.
If it is in a different kind of category of test, maybe to carve that out.
Standalone.
Just a thought on the title of this policy in AR. I know it's under section 200 pupils, but maybe just make it clearly student health services, because I know in the purpose in the policy, sorry. Why, I have to make things open. In the policy, it says, the district shall comply with all federal and state laws, regulations related to the provision of student health services.
Oh, in the purpose language of the
Just call it the policy for student health I don't know.
I think it makes sense to title it Student Health Services. Yeah, because that's what it is. It's not about employees at all.
Right.
I have a question actually about the first paragraph I'm sorry, it's in health services after the numbers, the first paragraph there. It says all teachers shall report to the school nurse or school physician any unusual behavior, changes in physical appearance, et cetera, which may indicate impairment of students' health. Then it says that the nurse or school physician or school dentist may advise a child's parents, guardians. Is there a reason why it's a may, not a shall?
If it was nothing.
If it was nothing,
So it's, there are qualified terms, so it's may advise.
and then it says it may upon referral by the teacher or on their own initiative. It just, okay, I just, so if you're saying that.
Because
I'm trying to think,
it's an apparent need.
What's that?
So it's, you may advise upon referral, or own initiative, regarding an apparent need.
There's nothing based on their examination, or, okay.
Right, because
Right.
if based on the examination, they're fine. They had a bellyache and they can go back to
Okay.
class.
So it's one of, I mean, I think it's one of those where using qualitative language,
Okay.
just because it's an observation, and they're not necessarily medical professionals.
Okay.
The teachers just
Okay, okay. So in other words,
picks up
going
on
medical
something in a,
professional- okay,
picks
that
up on
makes
something
sense.
in a classroom, then
Yep, okay, I got you.
Um,
Sorry, was someone else about to
So
speak?
I was just gonna ask another, question about, just practices. So under parent guardian notification, it says parents, guardians of students who are to receive physical or dental examinations or screenings shall be notified. Are they notified in advance of the screening, or are they notified after the screening has happened?
That would be in advance because they can not participate, but they could be present if they want.
Okay.
So it would have to be in
Is the-
advance.
The next sentence says that they're encouraged to attend or have it conducted privately.
Okay.
So would you like to see in advance?
I think,
Notified in
yeah,
advance?
just to maybe be a little more clear. And I guess if there's a practice of like how far in advance, I don't know if there is a common practice of.
I would hesitate to put a
Okay.
timeline like that.
Okay, I didn't
into
know
a
if that
policy.
was something that was sort of scheduled and routine, or if that was more of a one-off.
I just had a question about the practice of our school health services, that, like reading this administrative regulation, it focuses on the examinations and keeping up with the, compliance of immunizations and things. And then at the end, it's the emergency care, which is, what I tend to think of as keeping the school nursing staff busy on a day in, day out basis. I was just curious if somebody has some context on how much of the staff time is on the compliance and keeping up with individual students' medical records and making sure everything, has been done at the schedule it's supposed to, versus the sick care, emergency care kind of thing.
And certainly, Dr. Ramoundos, you're welcome to jump in at any time, but a lot is the compliance piece, and that sort of, like, that almost has its own, like, timeline to it, like, they're gonna be swamped with that kind of stuff at the beginning of the year, again, around, registration, key times, and then the flow of kids throughout the day.
Yeah.
There are, medications that children must take at certain times, and
Yeah, we're fortunate enough to have a nurse and then also an MBA in the office as well too. So the kids are constantly coming through, they're constantly checking on records and checking on files too. I never recall just walking into the nurse's office and see them just talking. They're not just chatting away, they're updating all the information that they need to update. And again, that especially happens at the beginning of the year as well.
But yeah, these policies give that insight
Yeah.
into the full scope of responsibilities, more than just what, the casual
Yep.
encounter might,
And those
make that
those
impression.
health, just as a reminder for the board, the health screenings, our nurses provide the health screenings in the non-public schools. So that, makes it extra busy as well during those, certain times.
yeah, medications is another one, but yeah, I'm sure that, is another daily routine that, requires a lot of time and attention.
Under the general requirements on the AR, the first requirement listed is informing parents, guardians of the existence of CHIP, which is very important. It just feels like it just comes out of nowhere. Does that need more language around it, more context? Is there a reason why that is like boom out the gate, the first thing listed? Or is it just me, the way I'm reading it?
So that was an update, and Dr. Larson, you may know this better than, was it 2019 that came out? And so that is a requirement.
To have it up top, up
that
front.
specifically
Okay.
refers to one of the obligations of the superintendent.
Okay.
But there's a little more,
There was further down, there was more
explanation
information, yeah.
Yep,
to
at the very end.
that. So, I mean, we could remove that bullet under the general requirements, under the heading of the notice,
I mean, it's very important, so I don't wanna like minimize its importance. Again, it just felt like, okay, I don't know if it stood out to anyone else, like maybe it just needs a little bit more language around it, or maybe move to another portion, or if it's good where it's at, then it's good where
I
it's
like
at.
it up front. It is so important
Right.
for people to know that that's available to them and their children. But I understand. Maybe we can say, as explained further below.
Yeah, maybe that was.
Just to reference, like,
yes.
this isn't the only place that this is.
Mhm.
The emergency care paragraph at the very end, I think that needs to be moved up earlier, because that's really about the care that the student is receiving in the school, and having it come after the CHIP paragraph just felt a little out of place now. And then also that is an older paragraph and it doesn't reflect the parent guardian language that we have in all of our more updated policies, so I would ask just, take a look at that paragraph. Or I guess those two paragraphs.
We can certainly make the updated parent guardian revision. Where would you like the paragraph moved to?
I mean, it seemed like it would make more sense coming somewhere around like the parent guardian notification. Maybe before religious exemption, before the health record, somewhere in there, I thought would be, you know, because it's sort of outlining like all the routine things that might be done, but then also it makes sense to say also there might get, everyone hates that phone call, right? In the middle of your workday when you know it's the school nurse. But it, you know, somewhere in there, like that's sort of the exception is, you know, that's not routine, right? That might happen.
Okay.
I think it would make sense after religious exemptions, because the religious exemptions really go with those
Okay.
earlier paragraphs
Okay.
about the screenings.
Yeah.
So I wanna
Just-
keep that
yeah,
together, but
yeah,
if you wanna move it up, move it
Mhm.
above
But yeah,
the
just
maintenance.
somewhere in that
Mhm.
area, and then move on to the records, and then move on to CHIP. And that kind of seems like a more logical flow.
Okay, since we are going to get a records management policy, like later in today, the 800 policy, part of this administrative regulation talks about that maintenance of records. Should that policy be cited, or are health records separate from the other ones considered?
No, it's gonna be, so part of, the proposed 800 policy is a records retention schedule.
Mhm.
So we should probably specifically reference the records retention schedule and,
Mhm.
in policy, or, well, right now, proposed policy 800.
I agree.
Just going back to CHIP for a second, since it is that first general requirement listed, I'm wondering if that statement about CHIP should go before examinations.
Where?
On page 1, be listed before so like right after the general requirements, then there's the CHIP statement, then examinations and the rest of the AR.
Does that make sense?
Yep,
Mhm.
that makes, I agree.
Before examinations.
Right,
Yeah.
so that since the general requirements say CHIP and then examinations, do the detailed CHIP and then examinations and go on from there.
Anything else on what we will now call student health services? Okay. We can go on to policy 210, medications.
And for 209, just the
Oh.
action is to come back to committee with these changes? Or to go to?
I think we had a
the
lot
board?
of changes.
Yes.
So I
Yep.
think we probably should see them again.
Yep, so just wanted to
Mhm.
clarify that for
Thank you.
everybody.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Two ten medications. Last revised in 2020. So not so old. We were here. Most of us.
Most of us were here, yeah, but, yeah.
Okay, so looking at this one, does anyone have any comments on the purpose?
I was gonna ask just first, is there, since this was a recently reviewed policy in 2020, is there a reason that this is coming up? Is it just because we were looking at other ones kind of on this topic or in this section, or has there been some new regulation or changes that we needed to account for?
There have been a couple revisions, that were addressed since then, but primarily what we've done and why there's, I'll call it slightly more extensive revisions is, incorporating so there's a reference to the Pennsylvania Department of Health Guidelines for Administration of Medications in Emergency Care, which I think the policy previously did reference, but it's just incorporating some of, and it's one of those, where this is what you're doing every day anyway, but it's committing it to the policy itself. So President Wiedemann, I don't know if that answers the question, but there's not really many significant changes with regard to administration of medication in the law. It's just adding more to the policy, and again, it's optional, so we don't necessarily have to add it.
Okay.
I like all the additional definitions. It's always good to define what we're talking about.
Yep, and here's where I saw district physician, where earlier policies had referred to the school physician. And then this policy brings up a certified school nurse. Is that different than the school nurse that we had referenced in other policies? Certified school nurse is a specific term?
It's probably it's the
Probably
same
the
person.
same,
It's the
okay.
same person. So we need to
Be
pick
consistent.
a term and
Yes.
stick with it.
Yeah, that would be helpful.
Keep with certified.
Although, well,
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
okay. 'Cause they're-
yeah, because our MBAs, most of them are certified school nurses,
Right.
but in the event that someone isn't,
Right.
there can be, yeah.
yeah,
I was just calling it school nurse.
school nurse.
What was the acronym you used?
MBA, medical building assistant.
Medical building assistant, okay. One of the things that was added to this policy 210 is a provision that it would be reviewed every 2 years, which is unique, I think, or to some extent rare to have that specific requirement in a policy. Could someone share some guidance on
That was a carryover from your prior version. I
If
believe.
it's not required, we should take it out.
Mhm.
Because 2 years comes, I mean,
pretty quickly.
We will be
you know,
finished
I
the
found this-
policy review.
I found this to be very recent and that is 3 years ago.
Right, I didn't know if there was like health, like for some reason, this
Yeah.
policy, medications is an ever-changing field and warrants that much policy attention. If not, I agree that we shouldn't, make
Tie
that
ourselves to
assumption
that.
in it.
I'm gonna put that on my list of homework because, I don't believe that that's necessarily in the code, but I could be wrong. I'll have to take a look.
And then we should just calendar it every 2 years because
Exactly.
it won't come up.
Bullying Title I. Administration of medication.
Any further comments on the policy before we move to the ARs? Or no, not the ARs, 210.1. Which is possession/use of asthma inhalers/EpiPens. This was adopted and last reviewed in August 2016, but does not have very many revisions. Oh, it does.
Sorry, can we just go back to the policy for 1 second? I looked up one of the citations and it seems to be about safety patrols. I just wanna make sure the citations match the policy. I don't see anything about medication or nurses in the reference.
Which one?
Let's see. The very first one. The first citation.
510.
Yes, 510 goes to safety patrols.
So, right, so section 510 of the school code is also a section of the school code that allows the district to adopt reasonable rules and regulations for the administration of schools. So yeah.
I'm just seeing a lot about motorists and safety belts. I just want to
There's-
make sure, like, it's,
No, that's,
yeah.
that's correct.
I see, but it's designating authority. Okay, got it.
Sometimes you have to really dig into it.
Seems like a
to
stretch.
Try to figure
Mhm.
out.
Yeah.
The legislature needs their own audit of the school code. Okay, so I think we're moving on to 210.1, asthma inhalers and EpiPens. Does anyone have any comments here on the first few sections?
I guess this is one where I'm just interested in the practical application of, language was added about violations may result in immediate confiscation of the asthma inhaler or the EpiPen and loss of privileges. Is the use of, or having a student have their own inhaler, EpiPen with them, something that has caused issues or been a disciplinary matter?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, just curious, it seemed like, enforcing that kind of.
I'll just say may result, right? And so
May,
I
right.
think it gives the option for our administrators to, enforce consequences if they are being used improperly.
Mhm.
I guess to Ms. Wiederman's point, I would hate for someone to potentially be in a position where their medication could possibly compensate it if they simply didn't know that I always have my inhaler with me, I always have my EpiPen with me. I didn't realize that I had to have something documented or informed teacher, staff, et cetera. So I would just be concerned that could potentially put someone in a life-threatening emergency.
Yeah, so how does that work? So if a student has an EpiPen or other medication that they self-administer, are the teachers or staff they come in contact with trained in how to administer that if there were an emergency? Like if the student has lost quote-unquote privileges to self-administer, like what happens?
We have staff who have been trained, I don't know, in terms of proximity, I would have to ask specifically the building principals about that.
And our school nurses, when children have EpiPens, are able to share a video with them how to administer the EpiPen, and they share that with them.
Is that required?
They talk to them about that, especially if they're going on field trips and things like that with inhalers and EpiPens. This is at the elementary level.
With this bringing up the elementary level with this policy and the one on medications in general, I did wonder if there's any reason to consider kind of different rules for younger students versus secondary students. And I don't see that language in here making that distinguishing, protocols for those different age groups, but in some circumstances that might be helpful or just adapt to
Check with
kind
them.
of the,
You could ask
behaviors
the
that-
nurses if they have found that to be, to be something that they would like to have addressed at a particular level.
right, like if the rule seems prudent and wise for elementary students, but the secondary level
Mhm.
is like, oh, this is overly bureaucratic or a challenge, right? Like,
Mhm.
that would
Well,
be good to know.
I'm just looking at page 6. Is this where it actually states that they need a note from a doctor saying they can their competence to self-administer, or they have parent permission?
Which policy are you looking at?
The AR,
Oh,
page 6. Now, this is under diabetes
Only
medication.
4 pages of the
I only have
210.1.
7.1 is,
I'm on the board docs, page 6. What's it actually listed? Are we in 210 medications? Do we move on? Am I just space out?
Are you in the AR or the policy?
I'm in the AR.
she moved on. Yeah, she's on the
Oh.
air.
Sorry, so I guess that addresses then
Oh.
competency
Oh, we haven't
or
gone over that
age.
one yet.
Okay, but that's where it's mentioned then. So you're getting at the point of like, should we have age-specific requirements, but there are certain requirements around who can self-administer. So I think that gets at the question of age appropriateness.
Got it. So it's very detailed. Before we move on to the AR, did anyone have anything else on 210.1? Okay. All right, and then we'll look at the AR now, which is 9 pages and very, very detailed, which is appreciated. Does anyone have any comments or questions on this one?
So, starting in the definition, there's a licensed healthcare provider. And then elsewhere, there was referred to a licensed healthcare provider or practitioner, and the categories of professionals don't match what was in the policy. So in the 210 medications policy, the definition, there's a definition for a licensed healthcare provider / practitioner, and it includes licensed physician, podiatrist, dentist, optometrist, school registered nurse. It goes on with that, but then this is a different list, so we might want to have those conform.
We could just take this definition and put it into the policy,
Throughout.
because it's.
This
and then
one
that-
seems to be more complete.
Yeah, I agree, it seems to be more comprehensive, so remove that sentence from the definitions in the policy.
In the policy and use this one.
Take it from the AR, yeah. And then we don't have any definitions in the ARs, and it can just be, you know, as defined in the accompanying board policy.
Mhm. In the next section, it says request from parent guardian for school to administer medication. Number 6 is the initial dose of a new medication shall not be administered during school. It goes on from there. Does that mean, I think it means it's
First
new
time,
for the student.
If you've never taken it
If the
before.
student has never taken it, but
Yeah,
not like,
that's
oh,
unclear.
this is just off of the shelf
That's
from the
unclear.
FDA, so like, it's not new in the world, so I just thought that could be clarified.
Initial administration of the dose or something
For a
like that.
student, right, for that particular student.
So how would that take into account like emergency medications? Like for those who are prescribed an EpiPen, they have never actually used it before, and then experience an anaphylactic emergency, could potentially be the initial dose of them taking that medication.
It does say except in life-threatening situations.
Okay, so that covers that piece there.
I think we lost the definition of responsible personnel when that section was moved from the policy to the AR.
It's in here, it's in the policy. It was just moved. But it's in the policy.
Okay, sorry. Do we need it in the, yeah, I see it now, thanks. Do we need that in here as well, in the AR? Since we No, just in
We'll
one
just
place?
we'll have a sentence saying that all of the definitions from the policy are used in the same way
Okay, great.
in the AR.
Okay, and then this is another place, where, like, point number 1, there's a designated form. Since this will be online, if there's a way to link to whatever that designated form is, that might be really useful for people.
Yes.
And then just under point 15 on page 4, there's a parentheses, looks like a note that should have been removed last time this was revised in bold and star, may need to revise this list. So let's remove that and also see if we need to revise this list.
What number?
Number 15
15.
at the top of page 4. And where it's referring to the list
Got you.
includes
Thank you.
generic Tylenol, generic Advil, generic Benadryl.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I wonder if we were gonna revise it for more or fewer.
So those are basically like,
We'll check with the
Over
physician.
counter. Yeah. Okay.
are we ready? There's a special procedures for diabetes management. And at the bottom of page 6, there's a paragraph that starts off, a school entity that prohibits a student from possessing and self-administering diabetes medication. And it seemed weird that we, in our own policies, would refer to a school entity that prohibits a student, I just wasn't sure where this language came from and like who we are directing that to.
President Weeman, where?
So it's at the bottom of page 6, at least how it printed out on mine. It's the special procedures for diabetes management. There's 4 things that are cited there, and then there's
4 paragraphs.
the second paragraph after that. So
The
keep
school
going.
entity several
So you
times.
keep going, yeah, there, and then there's the 4, it's right here at the bottom of this page. So, yeah, I just thought the phrasing was strange, a school entity that prohibits a student.
Mhm.
What's, and then it goes on, the school entity shall, like, it's just, that's not language that we use
That
for
we've
to
used,
our-
yeah.
Sure. Sure.
And I think the last provision in here is for sun protection, and that also seemed to be one that I was like, is that
It is.
That's a requirement.
a
Of
requirement?
course it is.
Is there no way to put, like, I'm thinking of like kids who play sports and, you know, they're middle school, high school students, they're at a track meet for 6 hours. Like, can they self-apply sunscreen? Like, just trying to think of the practical implications of some of this.
It says they can, doesn't
Yeah,
it?
Mhm.
yeah.
Yep.
Wait,
think it
you're supposed to
says-
send in a note or something, right?
No.
Without a physician.
Students shall be permitted
It's just that,
while under the supervision of school personnel without a physician's note or prescription.
If,
Yeah.
if the
Are
parent
these and or
submits-
or?
This is
I was
really
reading them
submits
as
the
or.
appropriate
Section about
form.
putting on sunscreen.
Yeah. I was
parent
reading them as
submits an
or, but were you
appropriate
reading them as
form.
Yeah.
and?
I don't know, maybe, yeah, so, like, it just, that seems like one of those ones.
So,
that-
yeah, I guess my question is, are these 3, because I was reading them as this or that. Right? Either it's over-the-counter use approved by the FDA, or a
It doesn't
parent
say
guardian
and,
has the appropriate
yeah.
form, or the student submits the appropriate form, so, but is it and? Because then, in that case, yeah, that's interesting.
no, I believe it's an or.
So then we should just.
Well, if it is, let's
It
put
should
the
be an
or
or.
in.
It should be an
Yeah,
or,
right.
yeah, okay.
Did this language come from like where did this come from? I feel like there's gotta be a story behind this.
Like who was
Like,
lobbying for kids
yes.
to be able
For
to.
the
I like how you can't use the aerosol one.
No aerosols.
No
that's the
aerosol
problem.
sunscreen, don't even think
Environmentally-
about
It's
it.
environmentally,
Not at
Mhm.
daycare either.
Right?
This
You wanna
is so
breathe it in?
strange.
No, it's not in our policies, and this is a little sidebar, but, I was a chaperone for, for Canadensis, and I loved that one of the repeated requirements was like, no Axe body spray, no Axe body spray. Like, yes, any of those aerosols.
Put it in the
body
policy.
spray.
Oh,
So do we actually,
In the middle school, I guess that was a thing.
That's fabulous.
do we actually need a policy? Like, all jokes aside, I do know that, like, for daycare, we have to sign something for sun protection.
Yep.
But is this something that we actually need based upon code for school-age children?
You could probably sum it up in a sentence.
Do we need a
This
sentence?
seems like
I
a lot.
think
It is in the code.
Okay, so we need
Yeah.
to
I would-
say
yeah,
something
Yeah,
so-
about
we
it.
do need to say something.
Okay,
So the
let's say it.
the AEDs,
Yeah,
the
this is-
diabetes management, all of that, I mean, as long as you have a sentence addressing it.
So then this allows,
Sun
like, for
protection
that
was-
kind of common sense, like, it's our understanding that if it is a generally sold sun care product, FDA stamped, students are allowed to self-administer without the, needing a form and all of that.
Let's
That's our
find that out.
interpretation is, right?
Yes. Yes.
So like, I'm just reading through, the district may revoke or restrict the possession, application, or use for students who show an unwillingness to safeguard their sunscreen product from acts. So like, I mean,
It's all code.
okay,
Yeah.
all right.
I would love to take credit for that.
Okay, I mean, it just is like, do not share your sunscreen
Oh, there's a no
with
share.
anyone,
UD has a whole-
safeguarded.
UD has a whole sunscreen
responsibly.
protection page, and then has the sunscreen
Revokes
forms. I guess students need to be trained in how to properly
Right,
apply.
that's one of the options in this AR,
Just
right?
seems
I
a
thought.
That'll be
little-
part of the
yeah.
curriculum.
But it's, I mean,
Yeah. So, I guess I would say if there's a way that we can shorten this, and if there's a form that a parent needs to fill out, just link to the form and like, maybe just let parents and guardians know.
If they have to,
If they have to.
If-
because-
if they don't
if
have
the-
to.
Cause the ideal would just be if it's approved by the FDA and we got it from our local pharmacy, that's the end.
Then it would be,
And
yeah.
we're done.
Yeah.
We're done here.
It says the parent guardian must submit a form allowing the student to use topical sunscreen.
yeah.
And the student must submit a form stating that they are aware of the
It is
proper
an
use and
and.
safety precautions of the product and will handle it appropriately.
That's terrible news. There you
So the
go.
only thing that I can think of that may potentially, lots of air quotes, warrant such a policy is if a student shares their sunscreen with their friend and their
You're not
friend
allowed to
happens
share it.
to it. No, they're not allowed to share it. but I'm
develop a
thinking-
rash or something.
Right, I'm
Yeah.
wondering if that is, if there's need for some sort of protective language around that.
It's actually written in the code. They also cannot share sunscreen. Is that in the AR?
It's so strange.
Okay.
Does it say it though in the AR? That's a really important point.
Maybe that's about the unwillingness or inability to
Fails-
safeguard
Fails to,
the
yeah, we didn't,
non-aerosol
we
topical
didn't spell it
sunscreen
out.
from access by other students.
Right.
So there you go. Shield it.
Don't
hide
share
it.
Yeah.
I would suggest maybe we look at the PDE language, which is like consistent with the code, but a little bit more user-friendly than this, like.
This is more from
really
2023.
Strange for
Yeah, this is,
sunscreen.
modeled off of PSBA. Which I think.
So we can look at the PDE.
Yeah,
We
look
can
at the
take- we
PDE,
can
look
pull-
up
yeah, we can take
PDE
that one.
sunscreen protection, like, at least from what I'm seeing, like, my non-legal lens is like, it looks like it's laid out here, and it,
More
is aligned-
user-friendly.
More user-friendly,
Yeah, we did that for the registration requirements too, so,
Okay.
absolutely.
It's just, it is kind of endlessly fascinating, the extent to which school code has
Yep.
opined on the appropriate method and means of doing all kinds
All
of
kinds
things.
of- Lots of minutia and Harrisburg. Okay. I think we're gonna bring this one back to committee too.
Yeah.
Guys, our next regular public board meeting, we're gonna have nothing to show for this. We're gonna have a very lengthy report.
Student accident insurance is up next, maybe
Oh.
we can get through that
I
one.
had questions on that.
This one feels lengthy.
It's just weird. We can, yes, is everyone comfortable moving on to student accident insurance?
Yes.
With all the 210s coming back to this
Okay,
committee.
the two tens are coming back. Well, especially because most of the comments were on the AR, but we wanna keep them together.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving on to student accident insurance, anyone have any comments on this one?
So-
Oh, go ahead.
So I have a question about the authority, and if we're gonna do section by section, but
Sure.
So student accident insurance is available by private arrangement between parents and insurance carriers. So I'm understanding that it's completely not involving the school district. Is that correct?
Yes.
No, yes, okay. So the insurance coverage for athletes and students participating in other, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, how is that different than the first sentence that it's referencing? I know that it's private, but I mean, in terms of what the insurance is covering.
Well, my understanding is that the green text there, it's an injury that results from that, in the game.
Okay.
Or in the
Got it.
activity,
Okay,
the act of engaging in that.
That's
activity.
correct.
And the district has a policy.
And we've got the we do have.
We do. Okay, do
insurance.
we, notify parents of this policy?
I don't know about the policy, but I would imagine at the,
When you sign up for
When you
sports,
s-
there's
yeah.
all kinds of different waivers.
Well,
and
I
things.
haven't reached that yet.
yeah.
I'm in sixth grade here, so. Okay, yeah, I thought I thought this whole thing was very interesting, and I learned something new, that we have
Mhm.
insurance coverage for athletes.
Could I just step back? So it's called student accident insurance, and I'm thinking in my household, like what insurance is that? Are we talking about health insurance, like coverage, or
Liability.
it's our
Liability.
liability insurance?
Mhm.
And so somebody would have that in their homeowner's policy, or is it a separate policy that somebody gets when you have a school-age student? I'm just curious, like actually the mechanics or logistics of what this means, student accident insurance.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah.
And I don't know I don't wanna misspeak, other than that it's a separate policy.
Mhm.
And so
Why-
We could get the information for that and put it.
Doesn't it just make more sense to say the district does not carry student accident insurance, but it is available by private arrangement? I mean, just because this is something that we're saying we don't have, and that you can go get if you want, but that's not,
But for the,
It doesn't say we're providing it, though.
but for the limited circumstances
Mhm.
and.
right.
But we do have liability insurance for events that happen in our schools, not just
Yes.
for students, right? Yeah, I think this, and
Yep. Policy.
I think none of us here are insurance experts, but
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of breaking it down to things,
Mhm.
policies and things that people are familiar with and understand. And then also like if this is like, oh, I'm supposed to have something when my kid goes to school, like what is it? How can we check and make sure that we've got the appropriate coverage? I like for the sports, I think all I have put down is our health
Your health
insurance
insurance.
coverage.
Mhm.
But if accident insurance coverage is something else, I'm not quite sure what
I mean, if
I'm
it's
supposed to be
different
referring
from-
to, right?
so usually accidental insurance, how I understand it, it covers when it's like a payout, right?
It's a what?
Almost like a payout that, I don't wanna use when your insurance is not covering whatever the incident or injury was, and then you've paid this additional policy specifically for an accident that is not covered by said policy.
Okay.
Like your health insurance may cover, I don't know, let's just say X-ray. And then if there's something else that's in between the lines with that specifically, this person endured because of the accident, I always understood that is what that accidental coverage will cover. Most people, I feel like, would not necessarily have accidental insurance unless
Mm-hmm.
it's something that was offered to them as a part of a insurance presentation.
Right.
Okay.
So, yeah, I still feel like this needs a little more delineation of what kind of policies we're talking about. Because it ends
Definitions.
with proof of insurance coverage will be required, but like
Well-
specifically what kind?
And I have here whose,
Right.
right, and so I think this needs to be 3 paragraphs.
Mhm.
This, I mean, the one about the student accident insurance, I think we need to be clear that that's in general not the district's responsibility. And then we have the exception to that is for insurance coverage for athletes and students participating in extracurriculars. And then we have this third sentence, that students are required to have, I think that it should say students are required to have other insurance coverage to participate in interscholastic athletics. And maybe we say something like, as provided, as with information provided by the district or something, just because it feels like that sentence is incomplete. Proof of other insurance, I just don't know what that means. And so I don't necessarily think we need to define it, but so much as just say, as
Clarify the
required- as-
language.
Right, like as required when, during registration for the sport, or something like that.
Because it could be a scenario where if the family doesn't maybe have it for the student,
Yeah.
one of our options is to purchase. I don't know, because I haven't had that conversation with our
Okay.
particular district, but, that's kind of what I envision, like, you have to have it.
That's
'Cause
why
you're
it's in the
participating in
passive
these
voice.
And so your options are, you can either bring your own, or you have the option to purchase with us, I don't know, for the season or something. But
Yeah,
I
then
think
maybe just finish it up with something like, with information to be given at time of registration, or something like that. So that it's
Probably
not
good.
just like, because otherwise it just leaves more questions than answers.
touch base with the
And
athletic
I think
I
we
will.
need more clear reference to the actual school code or PA code that's being referenced, because I don't actually see a legal citation that is clearly applicable. The one that's listed here is relevant to athletics and school organizations. So like, what's the legal requirement for us to have insurance during the course of attendance at school?
Right,
It
this
needs
policy.
more meat here,
Well,
there's
you-
like, yeah.
I mean, so for general liability purposes, that's kind of you're not necessarily required, right? Some districts don't actually carry their own liability insurance. They're self-insured. And then if anything happens, they end up having to, resolve any issues out of their own finances. But, so as far as that, I can answer that specific portion of it, that you're not necessarily required to have liability insurance.
So maybe we need more information, thank you, that's helpful, more
Yeah.
information around like what the actual practices are, like for insurance and students currently, and then,
Sure.
yeah, kind of find the
Sure.
medium between those.
And it might be helpful, since this is in the 200 section concerning pupil matters and follows the health policy, like maybe the language or the title is just a little too broad. Maybe it is meant, like, if this is more applicable to students participating in extracurricular programs and sports, that kind, like, maybe that would help clarify what is and isn't meant to be covered by this. But in general, I think we all need
Yeah,
a
'cause
little
I don't
more of a
understand.
primer on insurance
On
in general.
insurance, yep.
Extracurricular accident
Well, also,
insurance.
Something like that, yeah.
class.
Oh, yeah, like would gym
It-
class be
yeah.
different, or is that, yeah?
So we'll get some more information.
Oh, so this one's not gonna come back?
No,
in
it's
that.
not, it's
Sorry.
okay.
Can I just ask
Workshop.
a clarifying question? Why would students participating in interscholastic athletics need additional coverage? Is that, it sounds like in the sort of the green paragraph that the district is providing that coverage. Why would they need more coverage? How are those different?
We need more information.
Yeah,
on this.
obviously. So, anyway, I'm not sure I understand like what we're providing versus what the student would be required to come with.
Right. And we're not even sure.
And are there
the
different
students
levels
can-
of the insurance? I don't know.
What I can, and I'm not gonna try to answer the question, Dr.
Okay,
Crispin, but what I
that's
can tell you is, school district policies for scenarios such as that are very broad.
Okay.
And may not necessarily cover the specifics of each injury or event that occurs. So likely, and again, this is just conjecture at a certain level. It's probably with the thought, that it'd be in the student's best interest to have a specific policy in the event that something happens, and maybe the district's carrier is gonna try to disclaim coverage. So that's just speaking in generalities.
And then I think it comes up alongside that, I recall that as a student signs up for the activity, there's all kinds of waivers and releases and things that people sign too, so there may be some reason why, like the insurance that the district has requires those somehow, right? But like, we get at it maybe in different ways, and some of it probably is looking at just like,
And then-
what's our practice, what are we asking students and families to provide?
And then there's also kind of this separate legal umbrella with the Political Subdivision Tort Claims Act and the immunity that the district would have
Right.
overall in the event that something did happen. So there's a lot of kind of layers to it, but I think the point's well taken from the committee that we need to do some further investigation on
Yeah.
It seems so simple.
Yeah.
It did seem simple, but that was the one where I was like, I don't get it.
And then I guess my other question is, since you're gonna be doing lots of research on this anyway, it sounds like, I understand the coverage for athletes. I don't necessarily understand the coverage for extracurricular programs. Is that any extracurricular program? Is it specific programs? Is it, I don't know. So just,
Wait, it's
you
written
know.
here, it would be any.
That would be any.
Anything, yeah.
Okay,
I once fell off a riser during a choir event,
Yeah.
okay,
just
yeah. So I mean,
throwing
yeah.
that out there.
yeah.
Accidents happen.
11th
Okay,
grade.
yeah, yeah.
Seeing the kids with the drones, they could drop.
There, there are a lot of different,
Yeah.
There you go.
You guys are making me think of was it Officer Buckle and Gloria? Like you guys know that story? Help me out here. It's the police officer with the K-9 and they go around to the school and like they try to prevent accidents, whatever. We'll do a read aloud one.
Sounds great. Next
Never
meeting.
mind.
Great.
You can assign the parts.
I will.
This one's coming back to committee.
Yes.
212,
Okay, so it's 8:46.
846.
And we have 212 and 800, and I'm gonna be honest, that I have a lot of thoughts on both.
Okay. So maybe
Which one do we want?
does the administration have a preference, or is one of these more time sensitive?
Do we have public comments?
We will.
That's what I was gonna ask too, is that I did wanna leave time for public comments, if there are any.
All right, so we will have time for public comment.
We want to try and start on one of these
800.
or not?
800.
If you want to try, I think both are meaty.
I was just gonna make the same suggestion.
Well, I'm gonna throw a question out here on 212. And what is the purpose of this? Why? I guess a lot of it seems like micromanaging to me. And I wanna stay away from micromanagement of our professionals. Obviously grading is important. Sorry, this is policy reporting and grading of student progress. So I guess it was 2 policies and now we're combining it into one. And I would just like the district, to the extent you haven't already, to look through this and see if all of this needs to be written in a policy.
Okay.
You know, it just has a lot of, I think, pretty nitty-gritty stuff in here.
Can we shorten it?
Yes, right. I think, you know, more delegation to the superintendent, delegation to our professionals, at their discretion. Are you gonna come in and tell me this is school code?
No,
Oh,
I was
okay.
actually gonna say the complete opposite.
Okay.
So what we, in reviewing the 200 series, the only reason this was a suggestion that it be combined, was just so, I mean, if it was the will of the committee and the board to maintain these policies, that rather than have 2 that both say something rather esoteric that relates to each other, that it be combined into one policy. But as you'll notice, I think there's one legal citation to, section 1531 of the school code, and all that says is you have to have a grading system.
Yes.
So if there was a desire to potentially even repeal both, we would support that as well.
I think if, you know, unless the rest of the board feels differently, if the district could just take a harder look and see if this type of specific language is necessary.
We will.
Do you have any other different thoughts on that?
Yeah, my
But
only, oh, go ahead.
mean about some of the changes, or just, I mean,
I mean, I'm
concept,
just trying to think of the
maybe?
concept right now, because like what I would like to see is a completely different version of this.
okay, no, I'm with you on that.
Okay, and then one that is, you know, just more deferential to our professionals.
Mhm.
Makes a lot of sense.
I do think that another focus of this should be, I completely agree, I don't wanna micromanage teachers at all. I guess one thing that we've been hearing, is the communication between, teachers and parents. I mean, cause in the current policy, it says that, that, sure, both student and parent guardian receive ample warning of a pending graded failure and, enable scheduling of parent-teacher conferences. I just, one of the things that we have been hearing is that that some parents would like a bit more communication between the parents and
Yep.
teachers. Again, I'm not entirely sure about what exactly, if we should come up with specific ways of doing that, or if it's a matter of, and the other thing was that I noticed that we're eliminating the issuance of report cards at intervals not less than 9 weeks. So I'm just curious, is there gonna be, that can be replaced with some other kind of reporting mechanism?
I think that was removed.
No, I'm saying it's being
Oh.
removed. I'm wondering, are we not doing report cards? Are we doing some other, and
No,
what's being-
that's the reference to the period of time there, the 9 weeks, and it's actually
Okay.
longer than that at the elementary buildings
Yeah, no,
now, anyway, anyway, so, no, we're not eliminating progress reporting or report cards.
Okay.
I agree with the parent guardian communication piece, Dave, and what I thought was interesting was that on the grading, it doesn't even mention parent and guardians in this.
Yeah.
And so,
Exactly.
it just talks about the student should know it, and I think I think why I really want the district to take a look at this is because this, to me, doesn't speak to even our current practices.
Yes,
Mhm,
I
yes.
Right?
agree.
I can check my daughter's grades every single day.
Yep.
I get live notifications when a quiz has been graded. So, there's a lot more happening than this lets on with the parent guardian piece.
It's
I
also
think.
important to put in the policy so that parents
Right.
are aware of some of these things. I mean,
Right.
everybody's aware
Download
maybe of
Power
how to-
School.
Download Power School, exactly. Get
Yeah.
get on that. But no, I totally agree. Just reflect our current practices and should really spell out a couple of additional things that we are trying to do to foster parent, and guardian. Instead of just, I think we had a general thing in here like, ensure the ample warning and, and report card. I mean, that was all I saw. So I think we need to
Okay.
do more than that.
Yeah.
The only other comment I had is the first sentence of purpose is that keep parents, guardians informed of student welfare and progress in school, and I thought welfare was a strange word to use. I'm not sure how that's ever
grading.
been characterized as a grade, like behavior, maybe. There's been matters that have, gotten as a note on a
Student progress.
a student progress report, but welfare seemed like not the right word for what's assessed.
Can we hear more about the rationale for combining the two? I understand maybe for being more expedient, but I mean, these are very separate processes. Grading student progress and then reporting out student progress. I'm not sure they need to be combined.
They don't, our review of it was that it was connected enough.
Yeah.
And that, in all candor, I don't believe that these two policies are even, necessarily recommended in the PSBA manual anymore. So it was kind of like if we're gonna maintain them, then just to give the board the option to potentially, I mean, they were also very short too, so to potentially craft a more comprehensive policy, that, with the assumption that some of this language was probably gonna be eliminated and revised.
And there's not an AR that goes with this one, because some of that seems like it should just be in an AR, right?
I think it should just be at the district's discretion.
Okay.
I mean, I just, when you think about, I'm one of the few people here that's not a teacher, but when you think about grading practices and reporting practices, it just seems so fluid,
Yeah.
you know?
No, I don't mean like down to the minutia, but
Yeah.
I mean more like parent-teacher conferences are scheduled at these intervals, report cards are distributed at these intervals, you know. We
I guess I just
encourage
think that's so
Important to keep that in
informal.
place.
So much
in
of that comes from
whatever.
your student's teacher, your building principal, you know, and so even like across our district, it all seems so different,
Yeah.
and grades are different, and.
Can I make a suggestion? I'd actually, if there's some way for us to get some sort of presentation, or maybe, I don't know if this would take place during curriculum, but like, I would love to learn more about like, what do these practices look like across the district? Would it be too much of an overreach if we do keep some of these policies on the book? Are there certain things that need to be tweaked? I just feel like I need more information about what's happening before I can say like, we're taking power away from people, or we're, getting too into the nitty gritty. Like, I just feel like I need more information about current practice.
We can look at that at the next curriculum meeting.
That'd be great.
Or hopefully the next curriculum meeting. The agenda escapes me right now, but we'll.
But that does go with, there's an audit being done now of assessment practices and things, is that correct? Like the district is reviewing different assessments, so that might fit in.
They
with-
are reviewing different assessments. The report card itself is not.
Is not part of it,
but
kind of goes with that.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I still would be really interested in seeing something much broader that doesn't micromanage our teachers, but
For which one? For the reporting or for the grading?
Both.
Or for both?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, I agree with Dr. Crispin. Like, I think it's good that we have a recommended schedule for when these things are happening, like what parents and guardians can expect for their students' progress to be reported out to them. Also, if a student is in danger of failure, that there is some process in place to kind of support that student or get in touch with the family. I mean, I do personally, as an educator, think that those are some things that we should consider keeping in place.
I think it'll be important to know what we have going on, because
Yep.
my experience with the district is that they do all of that. So,
Right, but we have a policy, right? Like, if there's a current policy, are they doing it because of the policy, or because, like, again, I'm struggling to understand, like, are we talking about getting rid of this completely and having nothing? Because at this particular
No.
juncture, I'm not okay
No.
with that, like,
we're not saying that.
okay. Because I just heard it wasn't required and some districts don't have it or something, or maybe I'm just tired.
But I think it will be thought about, revised, and come back to this committee.
Yeah.
And so with that, we'll pause on our policy review and move to the final agenda topic for those who have bared with us for a lot of content. It is now time for public comment. Do we have anybody who would like to speak to the committee?
You do
No,
not.
nope, this is a committee, so we're,
I did sign up, but just in case. But it's very short. My name, do I have to state my name and all this normal stuff?
And that you're in the district.
My name's Sarah McCafferty. I live in Haverford Township. I have 2 kids at Chestnut Wald. And I just wanted to speak tonight to thank you for how much thought and deliberation you put into these policies, having sat through it myself now. But I also wanted to thank you for the thoughtful discussion, specifically from the curriculum meeting on February 23rd around the homework policy that's from 2010 and considerations about updating that as well. And I believe that as a parent and as an educator, that these decisions should be made with research-based evidence and teacher input and not parent input. I'm speaking as a parent, but I agree with the comments made by several of the board members about looking into this with more information. And I'm disappointed to see some community members misconstrue those comments, because I think we all know that like COVID has changed many things, and I think it makes sense to be looking at some of these policies that are pre-COVID and seeing how they can be updated. And I know that after the school year of 2021, a lot of administrators sent out surveys to the school community asking, like, what do you want to keep from this? Like, this kind of made us reimagine things. What was good? What was bad? What do you want to hold on to? What can't you wait to get back to? And I know at Chestnut Wold, a lot of responses were, like, we liked not having homework. But again, that's just parent input. That's one piece of the puzzle. But I do think that there are things from this pandemic that we've learned. Totally, like, random thing was at our PTO, we decided that the virtual variety show is actually better than an in-person variety show. You get to sit at home, watch it on your couch, have some popcorn and some pizza with your kids, and also the things that kids have shared virtually are so much more diverse and just they're able to do so many more things from home. They can do a cooking demonstration, which they could not do on a stage in the auditorium. So I just hope that we know that there are things that we can take away from this pandemic and learn from, and that I totally understood that that was the intent of the comments from board members. And I hope that the rest of the community can understand that as well. So, thank you.
Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Monet Riley, and I'm a Haverford resident. And I didn't have any prepared comments. I'm actually just going to talk about what you guys talked about tonight. So my son has asthma, so he carries an inhaler, and just some general things of, like, we're in the middle school, and we went to, like, the information session at the beginning of the year. Like, we were told, like, middle schoolers still are not allowed to carry inhalers. So in terms of, I know you guys were talking about breaking the policy down in grade level. I don't know when that starts or if it's just a sixth grader, but we were told, like, they should not be self-administering inhalers, and they should be in the nurse's office. Additionally, right now, it does not seem, I know Dr. Ramoundos was saying that the nurses are trained, but the nurses do not go on field trips. And I know that because it's in my son's IEP that if a nurse doesn't go, I get to go. And I've been going on field trips. So nurses don't go, so that medication is being handled by teachers. So that's also a part of that. And then just the last thing, for that last policy, you guys were reviewing the wrong form of insure was used. It was INSURE, and it should have been EN. So if you're gonna use that same language, maybe just update to the right form of insure. And then the only other random thing is, I know when you guys were talking a long time about the insurance policy, I think a key piece of what was, at least what we could see on the board, was that it said that the district covers a policy if they're found negligent. And I know that's more of a legal term of, your janitor left water on the floor, a kid tripped and fell, like the district was negligible in how that happened, not, someone's joking around and falls off the rafters during choir practice, like if everything else was in the right procedure. So I think they were talking about, like, the umbrella policy of if we are found negligent in a student's injury, we have insurance to cover that. I'm not sure what the rest meant, but I think at least in that first part, I think that's kind of what it was referencing. So that was it. Have a good night. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. Any other comment from anybody? All right.
Our next meeting is April 17th.
Okay. Well, we can look forward to the next policy committee meeting on April 17th. And with that, our business is concluded and the meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.